House Rules Rewrite. Sri Lanka's big bet on regulation.
There you go. Good morning, everyone. I'm thrilled to kick off day one, first panel of our Sigma South Asia with our very respected and distinguished panel members. I am Jenny Ortiz-Bolivar. I'm Sigma World's Asia Lead Senior Journalist and Reporter. I know I have a very long title. I've been a journalist for 15 years. A decade of that was with CNN Philippines. I always tell this story, and then Sigma found me. And for 2 years now, I've been with Sigma covering the gaming and tech sector, and I'm very excited to be here. Sigma South Asia. Now, today is an important day in Sri Lanka because I'm not sure if you guys know, but there's a GRA bill which finally is in effect, very symbolic, because the GRA bill, or the Gaming Regulatory Authority, is now enacted and now in effect in Sri Lanka today, December 1, and we're having Sigma South Asia here in Sri Lanka. What a great news, right? Great news. Now, I want to give a few moments to our panel members to introduce themselves as well, their name, their position, and of course their company and what they do briefly, please.
Hello all, thank you so much for the time that actually you deducted, to see us here. So my name is Katerina Shepetenko. I'm a managing partner of Legal Pilot firm, and we assist the international companies, international businesses with all the legal stuff that they do have in their iGaming operations for both B2C and B2B sectors.
All right.
Hello, my name is Markus Stricker. I'm working for Fortanach as a managing partner. We are providing price indemnity. That's a service that you can offload large price sums to the insurance sector.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rushda Niyas, and I'm the managing director of JAAR, which is a law firm based here in Colombo, Sri Lanka. And we are a commercial law firm, but support a lot of gaming operators with advisory and regulatory services.
Hi everyone, I'm Prasun. I work with Sportradar and I take care of the South Asia region.
All right, now I want to start with Rushda here. I've mentioned the GRA bill. It fundamentally changes, how gaming will be governed in this country, Sri Lanka. How does this new framework reshape the regulatory landscape, and what does really it mean for the gaming sector in Sri Lanka?
Thanks, Jenny. So like you rightly said, this is a very symbolic day because the new Gambling Regulatory Authority Act becomes operational today, 1st December 2025. So to give you a little bit of context, until the GRA Act, Sri Lanka had a very fragmented set of laws to govern this sector. So we had a ad hoc approval process for land-based gaming, and iGaming was in a regulatory gray zone. There was no licensing requirement, nothing like that, but it still continued to exist without any pushback from the government. But this new Gambling Regulatory Authority Act is extremely important and significant because this basically now sets up a unified central regulatory mechanism to regulate both land-based gaming and iGaming. So this includes how it's going to be licensed, how it's going to be regulated, how it's going to be monitored, and how they are going to be enforcing the compliance requirements going forward for all types of gambling in Sri Lanka.
Very interesting. Now, Katerina, I think you want to add something to that. Please.
Yeah, I would like to take a word and like to mention that actually this bill is critically important from the perspective of the international operators, so the businesses who actually operate worldwide. And as an advisor to these companies, I think that the uncertainty about the legislation could be a great obstacle, actually preventing the clients from the operation on this specific market. So as for this moment, the businesses, they already know, about the the strategy of the regulator, how they should get themselves prepared for the starting of all their operations and to have the stability of their operations on the each specific market. So now we do have the understanding on how we should proceed with the structuring of the businesses, like to have the local representation here in Sri Lanka and to get the understanding what are the technical requirements for the operations and what the business requirements, how we should get the entity registered here, and how we can add the Sri Lanka asset, like legal asset in this specific jurisdiction under the umbrella of all the global operations of the clients. So that is why I think that it could be a good reason for the investors to come and to start their own operations here in Sri Lanka and not be afraid of the uncertainty of or instability in this market.
I think it's very important that we're talking about, this having a regulation in a specific market. And I want to put this on record, with Sigma World, if you've been with us, you'll know that we're really pushing for regulation. This will really guide our industry. I don't know if you guys will agree with that. I want to go with Markus here. Your work revolves around helping operators manage volatility while staying compliant. How can price indemnity, let's talk about price indemnity and other risk-off mechanisms support operators under the new regulatory expectations?
So first of all, this is a little known field, but in a new and dynamic market, in a new regulation, I think it's worthwhile to point out that this is interesting, not only because we do it, otherwise, but it's interesting because if you enter a new market and you have a new operation and you comply with whatever you have, then this sort of looks as if it's on the fringe, but it's actually not. But what happens if you just start here and you have a massive winning? Great for marketing, but you have to pay, you have to comply. It's regulation. You can't just say what you would pay out and then sort of go and make deals with players. And here comes the intersection between gambling and financial services, because we are working with companies that they want to offload some of the peak risks, some of the peak liabilities. Now, how this works, I'm not going to go in, but I'm relating it to regulation. Financial services are a highly regulated business. This is a new regulation that comes in, so I just urge you, if you are interested in doing this, check that you're working also with the regulated services, because typically what we see around the world when new regulation comes in, it all focuses on money laundering, on legal setup and licensing for the operator, but it doesn't so much cover which services you buy, and many of them, including price indemnity. We talk about serious money. I hold the claim of fame of having settled $300 million in the world of gambling winnings. So that's a sizable amount. And that was paid by regulated insurance companies. Now, we know that in new environments, typically sort of, let's say, semi-legal or illegal operators on the financial side come in and say, we sell you sort of insurance for risk. Don't settle for sort of. The regulator might get on your back, because that's not what you should be doing, and also the financial regulator might eventually get. So my point is, you're actually handling client money and you're making promises. These promises can be hugely interesting because the insurance easily covers millions. Yeah. But make sure it's regulatory compliant.
Anyone who wants to add to that? Maybe Prasun, do you have thoughts on, any risk of tools for a regulated market?
Well, I think the first tool that comes to my mind is on responsible gaming, responsible gambling, because Sri Lanka is just about getting regulated. The JAAR mandates that you do responsible gambling. And what happens is when you transition from an unregulated grey market operator to operating in a licensed territory, it becomes extremely important that responsible gambling doesn't remain a tick mark activity. You don't want it to be a section at the bottom of a website which users are expected to go, but they never go. Users are expected to do something themselves, but they never do. What you need today is something that is personalized, proactive, and AI-driven. Like, I'll give you an example. Our marketing teams have become very proactive. They are able to predict VIP users. They are able to predict churn. AI and technology today can help you predict problem gambling as well. And the use of these tools, when you actually implement them in spirit and not just the letter of the law, you can actually see a positive impact. And in a country where there's about 20 million odd population, you can't go wrong with responsible gambling because it's a very tight-knit societal culture where one person impacted means quite a lot of people get impacted. And very soon you have a problem which is so big that then you're forcing the government to intervene and then change regulation, which is again never good. So that's one thing I would say, something to watch out for.
Right now, I want to dig deep a bit more on responsible gambling, really close to my heart. Now, Rushda, can you tell us, do you know anything about this framework, this GRA? Where is responsible gambling in there?
Jenny, it's a big part of the underlying framework because it is considered as the GRA is trying to balance revenue generation, regulation, and responsible gaming. So there is going to be a lot of oversight that is given to the commission members and the officials to ensure that gaming is conducted in Sri Lanka in a responsible manner so that there is no social harm that is caused to the population, because that will be the biggest balance that the regulator will have to play when they are legalizing and regulating the industry.
Yeah. Now, I want to ask Katerina as well on this. You've been to other markets, other markets. How do you see, or how can Sri Lanka learn from other markets, framework in terms of responsible gambling?
Okay, so I would say that as for this moment, the legislation has established just like the main framework, let's say. So as for this moment, we do not have like any details, specific details on how all the procedures should be implemented. However, as for sure, I call all the operators to be proactive in this manner and to consider the responsible gambling instruments not as something as just legislative requirement coming from the regulator. And I want to show actually that those instruments, they do build trust, okay, of the users to the brand that you have. So you could use all this instrument in your favor. And, we have like some standard instruments that are widely implemented into, some different markets, like for example, for sure the registrars of the self-excluded players. So it's like very important to follow this rule, and it should be like an obligatory case whenever the user comes to you and ask for the self-exclusion to proceed with it right away, immediately, and actually to exclude the person from like all the brands that are under the umbrella of one single company. To also like to set the limits for the deposits in case that needed, to set up the cooling off period. So that is, like the golden standard, let's say, that being implemented like in any region here. So do not wait for some specificities, it's like better to arrange everything prior than whenever we have the specific instructions, because, like you will have the grace period in order to have everything implemented as per the detail coming from the regulator. But the main things are already known to everyone. So in case you are seeking for some instructions, you could check, about the average standard coming from, I don't know, like some European jurisdictions like UK, UGC, or like the one from the MGA. So that could be, you can get oriented by yourself by these policies that are settled here, and they are already tested with the time and the quality, of all this instrument tested by the users that will build the trust to your brand.
Now, I like what you said there. Operators, iGaming leaders need not to wait for a framework to integrate responsible gaming. It should be there from the onset. Very, very important. I want to go to Markus here, Well, operators often see regulation, I don't know if you guys will agree with me, as an extra cost. Maybe, I'm not claiming, but I don't know if you will agree. But how can they flip this mindset and use Sri Lanka's regulatory framework to foster, collaborations? And that's why we're here at Sigma World, right? That's why we're here at Sigma South Asia right now, to really collaborate and open discussions with regulators, operators, suppliers, and all the players in the gaming industry. So how can we change and flip that mindset? It's not an extra cost.
So first of all, true, it is an extra cost. There's no doubt. The Wild West is cheaper, but the Wild West is more dangerous. You can be shot. So I urge you to comply, and as I said before, compliance, and you just emphasized that as well, in an act which is so new, not every implementation detail is ready right now, and so you can look at GCUK or other ones in spirit. Of course, you have to locally adapt it. The sums may not be the same or so, but how can you turn it to your advantage? At least in our view, again, just because of my background is insurance, what we see, for example, some of the companies, they want to aggressively go in. Typically, when you go aggressively into a market, you sort of, should we bend this rule or that rule? And you don't want to do that. That's exactly when you start offloading some of the risk in a legally compliant manner. So the mindset is work with regulated compliant providers, but use instrument. And again, I would urge you to look at the UK market or at other slightly more developed markets, what some of the providers have done. And I'm not dropping names, but you can use it some large providers. And I mentioned the sums that I regulated. So some of them are using it to their advantage. Just think you have a massively large winning. Then all of a sudden what was the burden becomes an advantage, because you can possibly go out and say, look, we can settle, we live up to our standards. But yeah, so it's true, it is a burden, take it serious and work with regulated service providers, but try to find a twist by, it's not such a bad strategy to actually look in other markets and copy what some people have done.
All right, now I want to pick Prasun's perspective this, of course. How do you view compliance with regulatory? Do you view it, of course, it's an extra cost, as Markus said, but tell us, for you, how do you view it?
See, the cost of regulatory compliance is always less than the cost of over-regulation or a total ban. So if you're looking at regulation as a pure cost, I would say you need to look better, look different. Look at why Sri Lanka has got out JAAR. Yes, the citizens need a responsible form of entertainment, the proceeds of which will be used towards nation building. As long as an operator, you are aligned on these two things, that the entertainment has to be responsible and there has to be nation building coming out of the taxes that are generated, you automatically tune yourself to work towards that. It's an ecosystem you're creating. You're creating an ecosystem of an operator, government regulator, and a supplier. And as a very important part of that ecosystem, all your efforts should go towards, is it good for the country? Is it good for the user? If you can answer these two questions, profitability will automatically follow. And that's where I think it's important for people to keep that in mind. And I think it's more about being culturally very sensitive. And knowing that when not to cross a certain line, when not to get overtly aggressive in your face. At the same time, learn from the best practices that are there globally available.
All right, now I want to go to Rushda here about GRA and the port city. I'm sure everyone who's here at COD have seen the port city, right? Going through here. Now, what synergies exist between the GRA and the port city regime when it comes to licensing, tax incentives, and online expansion?
So the port city is actually one of the special economic zones that's been set up in Sri Lanka. So it's a specialized service-based offshore city. So there is a lot of synergies that exist between Port City, and now with the GRA, there is a lot of room for operators to understand and set up in the Port City within the GRA framework, so that you can also, like Jenny said, make use of the incentives that the Port City Commission provides. So for example, if you are a company that is eligible to set up within the Port City, there is concessionary tax rates So right now it's 7.5%. So if you look at the corporate income tax in Sri Lanka, it's 30%. So it's almost quarter of it if it is a company that is set up in the port city. So that's one major advantage. And also this is something that I wanted to just pick up when Markus was also speaking about. It was about the possibility of regulating the service providers to the industry. So there is actually one provision in the JAAR which is interesting. That's section 76(1) that provides the regulator the authority and the discretion to regulate service providers. Now, this is interesting for us to wait and see how they will take this on. Whether they are going to use this to also regulate the service providers to the gaming industry. So, if that is allowed, Port City can be structured and it can be capitalized as a B2B as well as a iGaming service providing entity, and companies can utilize the synergies that exist between the GRA and setting up within the Port City, and Port City also allows for easy expatriates, because in Sri Lanka usually the most difficult part is for expatriate workers to work here because visas are very difficult to obtain. But under the Port City there is unlimited expatriate visas available, so that's one major advantage.
No, that's good to know. That's good to know, right? Because again, if you want companies to come in and look at the country as a potential hub, then again, the government can look into that as well. Now, I want to go to Katerina and Prasun here. It's for operators. Katerina, maybe for many offshore operators in the room today and in the expo hall, this is a very important question. What steps should international operators take right now to move from, unregulated operations into full GRA compliance, from local representation to technical readiness to data hosting changes? What can our operators here in this room and of course from the expo hall, it's a very important question. How can we be a regulated operator in this country?
Okay, so first of all, I want to mention the following thing. I know there's a transition coming from the gray operations, to the full compliance with the new regulation. It's quite complicated things to everyone, okay? So first of all, I want to ask all the operators to be quite patient because, it's quite new thing for the regulators as well. And, the regulation of the online gambling is quite complicated thing from the perspective because they should highlight a huge number of different things, starting with the corporate structure and the checking of the source of funds and source of wealth of the UBO who actually hold the shares here, to the requirements from the local representations, to the key officers, those people who will play the crucial roles in the operations here, with the technical requirements coming to the service providers that you will use, like the games that will be integrated on your website, the payment providers that should be also integrated to the website, the way how you will proceed with the marketing here. So that is why the regulator will keep an eye on all the different things, and for them it's quite complicated, to launch all the regulation in parallel and to put it very clear for everyone. So for sure there will be some issues, and it will be not an easy thing to implement everything here. So the steps are the following. The first one, you need to have a good advisor here, okay, to check all the requirements that needed to be implemented. The second one, you need to analyze the basic structure, the global structure that you do have, and to understand how you will implement the local company, because the local entity will be required here, in Sri Lanka, how you will implement that under the global structure that you have. So will you add this, under the global holding company that you have, or it will be the separate legal entity here in Sri Lanka? You need to check it out. After that, for sure, you should be prepared for all the checks, how you will implement this entity, how you will have it registered, and to prepare the file of the person who will be the shareholder at this entity. And in parallel, I would say, the company incorporation, for sure, it takes some time. However, based from their practice, we do see that the preparation for the technical requirements actually takes a huge number of time. So as for this moment, we just know that the regulator will be able to have some technical audit. However, how it will be made, we don't know yet. Do not be afraid. I think that everyone knows here that we have the instruments, of the RNG certificates. For example, you should communicate with the game providers whom you're using for, to check whether their software is already, certified with global platforms like GLI, BMM, and so on. To communicate with the platform providers, the software that you will use, and to check what is the readiness of their software. Because as for the platform providers, they are not so well prepared as the game providers, for example, where this technical certification is obligatory, in all the markets. In case you want to resell your game, that should be certified already. So you need to put your attention, on the to proceed with the internal audit, okay, and to check what is level of the readiness that you do have, and to put the priority of your attention for the preparation of the technical side. Because as for the corporate structure, I'm pretty sure that it's not quite a complicated scene, rather than this preparation that we do have as for this moment.
Prasun, very briefly on that note.
I think I fully agree with Katerina when she says patience is a virtue that's needed here. What's also needed is to understand that the JAAR today is still in phases of evolution. There are committees that are going to define what exactly you can do it and how you need to do it. At the same time, it lays out certain basic structures, like for example, the data privacy. Now, it's clearly mentioned that you need to be data compliant as per Sri Lankan laws. So that's something to keep in mind and get ready. There are already regulations around banking, crypto, and all these other things which are already present in Sri Lanka. So you need to get ready around these things. So whatever was laid out very clearly in the law, a good understanding, a good local consultant that was just mentioned, these will get you fundamentally ready. And then as and when the newer guidelines come, which will be very soon, I'm sure, you can have a finer readiness plan for your launch in the country.
Yeah, and the reason why we're saying patience, because again, GRA is operational just today as we open Sigma South Asia as well. Now, I need to wrap up this conversation. We still have a lot of things to discuss, but I want to ask you, with GRA now operational in Sri Lanka, what can we as an industry expect from Sri Lanka moving forward? Maybe Katerina, you can say a few words on that.
Okay, so I just want to sum up, situation that we have with all the regulation here. Actually, that is a very good sign that we have, this authority to be introduced, and as for this moment, we can see for the stability of the jurisdiction. That is the significant scene and a good sign for all the international businesses to have everyone welcome to, to this market, and that's a good opportunity actually for the regulator to have the control of their operations, because in most of the jurisdictions, the governments, they do consider that in case we will just ban, the gambling, it will disappear from the market, and that's, we will have it clear from all the operations. Unfortunately, that is not true, so it's better to have, the control under the operations and to introduce the legislation here. So that is the great moment for everyone here, from the side of the regulator, for the operators, for the users itself, to have them actually being protected here. So we do foresee only the positive consequences from all that regulation side, and the launch of the new period of the operations here in the market.
Markus?
I think when you go from act to implementation, A, the time, yes, that matters, and B, I would urge you to either directly or via a consultant legal firm also provide feedback, because we assume the GRA is new. And so
Yes.
they also rely, if we want to have, as an industry, go proactive about it, and you were responsible gambling, all this, then you have to also provide them with feedback. Even if something is, this is very difficult for us because A, by Z. So I urge you to enter the dialogue, not just to sit there and say, okay, we're waiting exactly until they tell us exactly how this should be done. Because then you come into a more positive dialogue with the regulator. And I think it's important, it's valuable for the regulator as well.
Absolutely.
Rushda?
So, although the GRA has become operational, something that we need to keep in mind is that it's the framework. So the government, when enacting it, did it on purpose so that the commission with the right technical expertise can come in and set the regulations, which will be ideal and which will be able to govern this very dynamic industry. So that's why the GRA in its current form is only the framework. So we know that the government has a lot of stake in this because, for an example, if setting up a new regulatory authority in Sri Lanka usually takes a minimum of 2 years. But since the GRA was enacted in Parliament in September, it's only December now, and it's already been operationalized. And from what we hear, they want to be fully operational by June of next year. So what are we to expect in the next 6 months is that the regulations will come out, which will basically be the standards and the requirements that operators will need to review and understand. So like everybody said, patience is a virtue, but hopefully we will see a lot of traction and the regulations will come out soon so that we will have more clarity on what the standards are and the technical standards that will be expected to be met and be compliant by operators who are planning to set up in Sri Lanka.
And of course,
My timer has started blinking, so I'll be brief. So there will be a lot of consultations that we can expect right now in terms of the flesh and blood that's to be added to the skeletal framework that we have today. That will define how operators operate, and it's going to be a very exciting time.
GRA being operational today is a good sign. Future is looking bright for our sector in this country and in this region, and Sigma World is here right now. Again, thank you so much to our panels. Please give them a warm round of applause, and thank you to our audience. Thank you so much.